Hello friends! So we finished Half Magic and I promised you that I would start a new chapter book. I picked this book because it was one of the books that I loved to read when I think I was in 3rd or 4th grade when I found these books. And there's more than one, so if you want to read the other ones that come after this one, feel free. So this is a story about a very silly lady. Her name is Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle. I know it's a fun name to say, so that's part of the reason why I picked it. It is a 5.2, so it is a little bit higher. Sorry. But Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle, I think there are 4 books in the series, and she's a very interesting woman, and we're going to read about her today. And she likes to solve problems, but she solves them in kind of an interesting way. So we're going to read about her today. The first chapter just kind of introduces her, and then after that, we're going to get into her solving those problems. It's an older book. I was looking at it a little earlier, and it was written in 1947. So it's a little bit older, but there are pictures, so I'll show you the pictures if I can. And this is the first one. Chapter 1, Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle herself. So there's the little picture up there. I expect I might as well begin by telling you all about Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle, so that whenever I mention her name, which I will often do in this book, you will not interrupt and ask, "Who is Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle? What does she look like? How big is she? How old is she? What color is her hair? Is her hair long? Does she wear high heels? Does she have any children? Is there a Mr. Piggle-Wiggle?" Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle lives here in our town. She is very small and has a hump on her back. When children ask her about the hump, she says, "Oh, it's a big hump full of magic. Sometimes it turns me into a witch. Other times it turns me into a fairy. And on other occasions it turns me into a queen." The other children were very envious of the hump sometimes. Besides being magic, it was a great place if you wanted wings. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle had brown sparkly eyes and brown hair, which she kept very long. It almost went down to her knees, so that the children could comb it. She usually wears it on top of her head in a bun, unless someone is combing it, and then she turns it into a braid, or a very long curl, or long hair just hanging around with a crown on top. One day I saw her digging in her garden, wearing the crown, and her hair was billowing down her back. She waved at me and said, "I promised Betsy," Betsy is one of her children friends, "that I would not touch this hair until she was home from school." Then she went on with her digging. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's skin is a golden brown. She has a warm, spicy, sugary smell to her that is very comforting to children. Her clothes are all brown and never very crisp and pressed because they are used for dress-up. She wears hats, which she doesn't mind at all, and the children like to poke and twist the hats until they look like witches' hats and pirate hats. Sunday morning, she takes one of the hats off of her shelf, brushes it off, and wears it to church. She wears very high heels all the time and is glad to let the little children borrow her shoes. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle has no family at all. She says that her husband, Mr. Piggle-Wiggle, was a pirate, and after he buried all of his treasure in the backyard, he died. She's not telling the truth. It's not real. She just had herself, her dog Wag, and her cat Lightfoot. The most remarkable thing about Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle is her house, which is upside down. It's a little brown house and sitting there in a tiny garden. It looks kind of like a small brown puppy laying on its back with its feet in the air. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle said that when she was a little girl, she used to lie in bed and gaze up at the ceiling and wonder what it would be like if the house was upside down. So when she grew up, she decided she was going to build her house that way. She built her house upside down. The bathroom, the kitchen, and the staircase are right side up because they're more convenient that way. You can easily see that you could not cook upside down on a stove, or wash dishes in an upside down sink, or walk up upside down stairs. In the living room of her house is a large chandelier, but instead of being on the ceiling, the chandelier is on the floor. Of course, there really is a ceiling, but the ceiling is the floor, and the floor is the ceiling. And the children turn on the lights and squat around the chandelier, pretending that it's a campfire. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle says that her chandelier is the only one in town that actually has a real use. Her bedrooms all have slidey boards in them because if you will look up at your attic ceiling, you will see that the slanty ceiling is turned upside down. So if you look up at your ceiling, if your ceiling is like this, But imagine that if that was the floor, your floor would be like this. So she's got a flat board in between it so that her floor isn't slanted like this. Sorry, my watch. Also, all the wall lights are very close to the floor and handy for small children. For the first 5 or 10 years after building the house, Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle climbed in and out of her rooms over the high doorways. But now she has little steps, which are good for practicing jumping. So if you look up at your door, you can see there's the ceiling comes down a little bit. So if you had to walk over that every single time, it'd get kind of annoying. So Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle built stairs so you don't have to accidentally trip on your door. All right, Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle even gives children chalk so they can mark on the rug how far they jump off the stairs. Nobody knows how old Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle is. She says she doesn't even know herself. She says, "What's the difference how old I am when I still feel like I've never growing up?" Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's dog, Wag, had puppies once in a while, so she keeps a long list of children who want them on their blackboard in her kitchen. For Lightfoot's kittens, she has a long waiting list on the blackboard in the dining room. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's backyard is full of big holes where small boys have tried to dig up Mr. Piggle-Wiggle's buried treasure, and her front yard is full of flowers with little girls to pick and jam in vases and place around her living room or carry to their teachers. Every child in town is a friend of Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's, but she knows very few about their parents. She says grown-ups make her nervous. All right, I'm going to stop right there. We'll learn more about Miss Piggle-Wiggle next time. All right? I'll see you later, guys. Bye.